In this LMC Media Community Conversation, I'm speaking with Janet Fry, Deputy Director of the Community Resource Center in Mamaroneck. We're discussing the Excluded Workers Fund. Now, New York State put in place a $2.1 billion fund that provided pandemic relief to largely undocumented workers who were not eligible for pandemic stimulus benefits or expanded unemployment. Like other federal and state pandemic relief, the program and its funds have now expired and run out. Janet, thank you for joining me. Tell me, what is it you're looking for now?
Thank you, Mara, for having me, and thank you, LMC Media, for covering this this new legislation. What we're asking for right now in 2022 is two things. One is the replenishing of the current Excluded Workers Fund with an additional $3 billion. So workers who didn't have a chance to submit applications or their applications were pending with the Department of Labor have a chance to recovery and get the financial assistance from this fund. And the other, and the second thing we're asking for is to have a permanent fix to our current unemployment insurance system. So workers who are working in the cash economy, such day laborers, domestic workers, and street vendors, can apply for unemployment insurance when they lose their jobs or their incomes.
Well, let's talk about the first one first. The Excluded Workers Fund was for pandemic relief, and throughout New York State, all of that pandemic relief is gone. Why should it be extended for this particular group?
It should be extended because workers who continued working during the pandemic, who didn't have access or weren't eligible for government benefits because of immigration status, were really suffering during the pandemic. They faced.
But so were other Americans, and their relief has run out. I guess I'm asking why this group should be treated differently than others, because there is no more pandemic relief for anyone else.
Well, but that, I guess what we're trying to point out is that in all the workers who were able to receive benefits during the pandemic, this specific sector of workers didn't have that chance because they didn't have immigration status, and because they're usually not considered for any pandemic or even any disaster relief. We have done a lot of advocacy to have those workers who weren't eligible for anything to be telling their stories to legislators, to the media, and share how much they have contributed to our state economy because they pay taxes.
But there were many people who did apply to and get funds from this Excluded Workers Fund, which, as I understand it, is rare in the United States and the largest.
Yes, New York actually made history by creating this fund, and it was the first in our country. And the reason why it was created was because, workers, such undocumented workers, didn't have access to anything. They depended on food distributions, on the charity of nonprofits, but they didn't have a system that could provide them with staying at home when New York locked down. So we believe that it's important to take care of all our workforce sector across the state and regardless immigration status. I think that's a question that right now they are not asked when they have to go out there and look for a job. So in the tax question, I think we understand that we're not talking about sales taxes, we're talking about personal income tax. And when they work for an employer, those taxes get deducted.
How do you respond to critics who say you're just looking for another handout?
Well, the thing is that it's not another, because there are about 40,000 workers who were left out. They submitted their applications, but the fund ran out and they just couldn't get financial assistance to recover. So it's not that we are having another round for the same workers, it's that the funding that we had allocated wasn't enough for the number of workers that were eligible for it.
So Governor Hochul has said that New York State does not have funding to extend the program. Where do you suggest the money come from?
We believe that our state legislators can come out with resources. I think we are in a state that is affluent, and our champions, the ones supporting this legislation, have come out with ideas in terms of revenue raisers or maybe funding allocations from other sources. So we are hopeful that those legislators can come out with something that to replenish the fund, and also for a permanent fix that is so much needed, because now we have Omicron. It's not like the pandemic has stopped. COVID's still out here, and now with Omicron, we are afraid that we can go into another lockdown next year without that safety net that we all need.
So what kinds of funding methods are being discussed, if you know?
Right now, we are having conversations with the state legislators. I think we are early into the budget season, but we hope that, and those conversations are continue happening. But right now, I mean, we just announced this Excluded No More campaign, but hopefully in January, we will have much more specifics in terms of how we can fund this program.
For somebody to have claimed funds from the Excluded Workers Fund, what kinds of proof did they have to show if they're undocumented?
That's such a great question, because that was one of the things that we struggled after this program, after the state budget was passed. And we collaborated with the Department of Labor to come out with the type of documentation that undocumented workers usually are able to get. For example, when it comes to proving employment, they relied on self-attestation letters, for example. It could be their own word, or sometimes they relied on receipts from employers or any communication they have had via text, emails. It is very, it is not just one source of documentation that we relied on. We have to be very creative based on how we work with this community. But and so we are also mirroring this Excluded Workers Fund that we had this year, and kind of like make the same type of documentation required for the permanent program.
So the permanent program, is it to be, in your eyes, a separate program, or just that undocumented workers be able to apply for regular unemployment insurance, which requires that you have been employed for a certain period of time first and then be unemployed?
Exactly. Yeah, we're thinking about undocumented workers, but we're also thinking about workers who are US citizens and work in the cash economy and are not eligible for the current unemployment benefits system. So it's just them, and also for self-employed workers such as street vendors that are not currently eligible for the unemployment insurance.
And what efforts are going forward on that? And what opposition have you faced?
Oh, right now, I mean, we know the budget for the program, the cost of the program is challenging, because those sources have to be identified. I think that that's one of the most challenges pieces of this program. We haven't heard other opposition to this, because we saw the need. It's not just that we came out with this idea during the pandemic. Many people suffer, got COVID because they didn't have access to a safety net, and some of them died. Some of them lost their life, because they just didn't have a choice in terms of staying at home or going to work. So, but we know that we will continue getting more feedback and reactions to what we're asking for in the next 3 months.
Can you just tell us how people from the Larchmont Mamaroneck community benefited from the Excluded Workers Fund?
What I can say from the Community Resource Center, we work with day laborers, domestic workers, and we know that those workers, by accessing to the Excluded Workers Fund, they were able to stay in those communities. They were able to continue working for those employers, and also that they also were able to support their children, in school. So when we take care of our workforce, our whole community benefits. Unfortunately for Mamaroneck, Hurricane Ida hit, And that affected the workers who were getting ready to apply for the for the Excluded Workers Fund. They lost documentation, they lost time, and unfortunately they couldn't make it. So I think that taking care of our work sector is very important for our whole community to continue going forward.
Janet Fry from the Community Resource Center, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you
This
so
is
much,
a
Mara.
LMC Community Conversation. I'm Maura Carlin.